Welcome to the program tonight. Hopefully you've turned in, and I thank the Lord Jesus Christ to have this opportunity to preach to you. This is a small sermon. Colossians chapter 3, verse 9. Just one verse of scripture tonight. It says, "Lie not one to another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds." Very unusual sermon tonight. I'm going to preach to you on the subject, pastors that lie in the pulpit. The sermon is not about false preachers. Some of these TV preachers, they have net worth of hundreds of millions of dollars. They say Kenneth Copeland is worth over $700 million. I won't name, a bunch of names. You know them, Benny Hinn, Joel Osteen, all these guys. And they're obviously false preachers. They preach prosperity gospel. But what's really a shame is the congregations, people that send them money. You're to blame as well. So those people are to blame as well. If all these filthy money grubbing humber preachers, they have millions of dollars, well, people give it to them. They're both to blame. But that's not what this sermon is about tonight. I don't want to get off on that. I want to talk about pastors, real pastors, faithful pastors that lie in the pulpit, that exaggerate in the pulpit, which is lying as well. I'm talking about your pastor on the street corner that you've been going there for 20 years who lies in the pulpit. White lies, exaggeration lies, embellishment lies. This is a cardinal sin in the last days that's touching everybody. I mean, you read about college football coaches that embellish their resume or lie on their resume, and people do it too. Everybody puffs themselves up, but lying in the last days is becoming so prevalent. It's sad, politicians, presidential candidates, the lies just run deep. But I'm talking about your local. Let's talk about one thing tonight. So it's almost impossible to get off. Your local New Testament pastor that's saved, is going to heaven when he dies, gives all fruit. You love him, you've been counseled by him, he married you maybe. He's been a pastor there for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I'm talking about lying in the pulpit. I'm talking about embellishing in the pulpit. I'm talking about exaggerating in the pulpit. Let's talk about Proverbs chapter 12 verse 22 says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. I've been saved for 24 years, and I've heard lies in the pulpit. I've heard pastors lying, embellishing in the pulpit. Pastor, your words matter. Jesus said that every word that you speak, you'll be held accountable in the day of judgment. And that's not just unsaved people. That's everybody. Pastors, you need to stop lying in the pulpit. You need to stop embellishing You need to stop making up stories. It's beyond belief, and I don't mean to say that you're evil or wicked, though you're doing an evil, wicked thing. Um, have you heard any of these examples I'm going to give you? Um, we sent our college team out to the Daytona, Florida, and we got 250 professions of faith. Or a pastor visits the church and says, you know, we had a great time, we had a revival meeting, we got 35 people that got saved over our 2-week revival. You know, I was in the mission field and I was a guest of a missionary and down there in South America or Africa, and 500 people came to the Lord. They're lying. You're lying, Pastor. Okay, you're lying. I preached in jail last night and 8 people got saved. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. I've been preaching since 1999. This is the year 2016. So in 17 years of preaching, street, rescue mission, jail ministry, chapel, and I preached at 2 churches, and maybe I've given the gospel, preached in front of, you know, a couple thousand people, 30 here, 40 here, 2 here, 5 here, 8 here, and that adds up, and I've calculated it. It adds up to about a little, right at 5,000 almost. You know how many people got saved? 0. I've had a lot of people come forward. A lot of people, you know, nodded their head and said they'll get right with the Lord and they're going to get saved. No one has ever gotten saved in the 17 years I've been preaching that I know of. Those people at your revival meeting and those people that you sent your college team out, all right, no one got saved either. You're lying in the pulpit. That needs to stop. How many times have you been in church and the pastor gives the altar call, says things like every head down, every eye is closed, I will not embarrass you, I will not call you out by name, whatever your need is, you may come. Who needs Jesus? They're playing Just As I Am, and you know, every head down, every eye's closed, and the pastor's in the pulpit, and you know, everyone has their heads down, and you know, I kind of take a peek, and the pastor says, I see that hand. Yes, I see that hand right there. And no hands were raised. He's lying. I know years ago there was a church in Hammond, Indiana, that said 5,000 people got saved, or excuse me, more people got saved today than the day of Pentecost. No. You're lying in the pulpit. I've heard pastors say, we had 1,800 in Sunday school this morning. We had around 2,000 in Sunday school today. We got those buses rolling. Get those buses rolling. We had 5,000 kids show up today. No, you didn't. You're lying in the pulpit. You're lying. You're embellishing. It's a lie. Let me talk about a couple more things. Stealing sermons. Jeremiah chapter 23 verse 30 says, I am against prophets that steal my words, every one from his neighbor. stealing sermons. Now, if you're a stand-up comedian and you steal somebody else's routine, you're called a hack. And that's frowned upon. Now, if you're a pulpit, you're in the pulpit, you're a preacher, and you maybe you're at a conference, or maybe you pick up one of them books, sermon topics today or something. I'm not a pastor, and I'm sure over the years you glean from another preacher or missionary, and they made a good point and everything. I don't think that's a sin if you use it correctly under your topic, but to actually steal a sermon word for word, I say that's sin. But the one lying exaggeration in the pulpit that I hate with all passion is that when the pastor says something inspiring that's actually a lie, that actually is a story that he's been repeated for years, that's just an urban legend. There was a guy, I've heard this in the pulpit countless times. They were at NASA and they were trying to figure out how to do this rocket or space shuttle, or they were going to the moon, and the engineers couldn't figure it out, and one of the engineers remembered something in Sunday school class, one of the scientists, and where it says in the book of Isaiah 38 that the sun was held back 10 degrees, held back a certain amount of degrees, and that's how they figured out the problem. That's a lie. That's an urban legend. That never happened. No NASA engineer or technician ever did that. And you've heard that in the pulpit. Another inspiring sermon point is, I never forget the first time I heard this preacher say this. He told this story where this kid was a rebellious high school football player, and finally the coach put him in, and he ran for like 4 touchdowns and 300 yards, and the coach asked him after the game, "Man, you had a great performance today. I didn't know you had it in you." He goes, well, coach, both my parents are blind, and they died. They're in heaven, they could see. So when you put me into play, I was running for them. So they're looking down from heaven to see me run. That's a lie. That's an urban legend. I think it started in the early 70s because Jim Plunkett, both his parents were blind or something, and he played football for the Patriots and went on to the Raiders and won a Super Bowl. And I know it's a lie because a couple years later, I heard a pastor talk about, he told a story about a baseball player that was goofing off and, wouldn't start. And finally they needed, somebody hurt, so then the baseball player had to start. And that baseball player hit 4 home runs and hit for the cycle or whatever. And the coach asked him after the game, he said, well, both my parents are blind and they died in a car accident. I knew they were up in heaven watching me, and they could see me play. That's a lie. Then I've heard that same thing about basketball. Basketball kid in high school's goofing off. Doesn't play. Coach needed him to play for the big championship game. He went out there and scored 30, 40 points. Coach asked him after the game, he goes, well, both my parents were blind and killed in a car accident, and they can now up in heaven see me play, and I was playing for them. Them are lies from the pulpit. They are illustration and stories that never happened. And it needs to stop. You pastors need to stop lying with your illustrations and stories that you pretend are true but aren't. Another thing that you lie about is, since 1973, there's been 45 million abortions performed. Then another pastor says, since 1973, there's been 60 million abortions. No wonder God is angry with America. Then another pastor says, since 1973, there's been 50 million. You're lying. You don't know how many abortions have ever taken place. You're taking statistics that someone else lied and someone else made up, put it in an article or magazine, and you're taking that article or magazine and you're using it as your inspiring point in your sermon, and you're lying. Okay? I remember this youth pastor, lied to my face. He said, "Oh, you got to go to Bible college. Bible college is a great time, man. I drove pizza deliveries. I went through Bible college. I made hundreds of dollars a night, man, and I had a fun time in the dorm." Bible college is hard and difficult. And I went to Bible college, and I never was a dorm student, and it was hard and difficult for me. Bible college is not a great time. It is hard. It is difficult. Satan is going to attack you. You're going to be challenged. You have to persevere. You know what I'm saying? People need to stop lying. They need to stop embellishing in the pulpit. It starts with you, pastor. And I'm sick of it. I'm about ready to jump up in church if I hear one more lie from the pulpit. I don't want to hear these guest pastors coming to church. "Oh, we had a great time, man. We had a cookout, and we invited people from the neighborhood, and 15 people got saved." Liar. Liar. Okay? Pastors lie about how much their congregation runs. "Oh, we're running about 250 on Sunday morning. To another 250 Sunday night, about 150 on Wednesday, and then I go to the church, and they're not running that many." Pastors, you're lying in the pulpit. You're embellishing in the pulpit. That just needs to stop. Be truthful. Be honest. Quit stealing sermons verbatim. So, not the greatest sermon tonight, but we're heading for, rougher times in America. We're always in rough times. Have always been in the end days, the last days. But as I'm speaking in October 2016, I think, the next couple of years in America, 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, we might see final amount of freedoms go. Now, I'm not embellishing. I'm not lying. But it's important that we stop lying and embellishing. Especially people that have a pulpit ministry. Because you're ruining Christian lives. That's not an embellishment. My life has been ruined by lies from the pulpit. And it makes a Christian, from my own experience, disillusioned. And, discouraged. And ready to quit. Though I doubt I ever will go back into the world. I doubt that I'll ever go back and leave Jesus Christ and leave. I've had it. We've had 3 pastors now in a couple of years at my church, and I'm tired of it. And some of you pastors, you're lying on your resume. You're lying on your... I could tell you one pastor in Central Florida, the big one. "What Bible college did you go to, sir?" No, he won't tell you. "Do you have a doctorate degree?" A lot of pastors put doctor next to their name. Did you really get a doctorate degree? from a Bible college? I don't think you did. I think you're lying in the pulpit. Anyway, thanks for your time tonight. Have a great night.